Hello, and welcome to a Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness video, where today I'm going to be using Relicanth and Wailord to beat the game. And these two are very interesting because they are used to awaken the Regis in Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. And I do really have high hopes for these two because I do think that they have a lot going for them. So let's go ahead and get right into it, starting with their stats and move pool. Relicanth is a rock water type with 100 HP, 90 attack, 130 defense, 45 special attack, 65 special defense, and 55 speed. And it gets access to mostly normal water and rock type moves, but it also gets Earthquake, and with a solid 90 base attack, it should be hitting fairly hard with it, as well as the move Ancient Power, which is really good against the final boss's Pokemon. And moving on to Wailmer, who has 130 HP, 70 attack, 35 defense, 70 special attack, 35 special defense, and 60 speed, and gets access to mostly normal and water type moves. However, it does also get Ice Beam, which is really nice, Earthquake if I want to run it as my physical attacker, because when it evolves, it also has 90 attack, which means that I can also use the move Rollout, which, while I won't probably end up using, could be good against the final boss. But anyway, with that, let's go ahead and move on to our Wailmer in particular, which has an adamant nature, raising its attack but lowering its special attack. Definitely not a great nature for it, but because it's equal on both sides, it doesn't really hurt it too much, and so I think it's fine. It has the Oblivious ability, which prevents attraction. It could have also had Water Veil preventing burn, but I ended up flipping coin and got Oblivious. And according to Bulbapedia, by level 10 it gets Splash, Growl, and Water Gun. So with that, let's go ahead and move on to our Relicanth, which also just so happens to have the adamant nature, which I think definitely helps it a bit more because it is more of a physical attacker. It gets access to the Swift Swim ability, which doubles its speed in rain, though it could have also had Rock Head to prevent recoil damage, but because its speed is real slow, I went ahead and picked Swift Swim for it. And at level 10 it gets Hardened, Tackle, and Water Gun. So with that, let's go ahead and get right into it. And one of the biggest issues with Relicanth, especially early on, is because there's a lot of grass types in the early game, it does actually fear a lot of the 4 times effective grass type moves that get thrown at it. Case in point, the Shroomish, which if it decides to go for Absorb could actually deal a lot of damage to it. So I'm having to take it down as soon as possible to make sure that doesn't happen. And luckily it just decides to go for Tackle, but I do have to go into every single battle, considering the fact that Relicanth could just go down in 1 or 2 hits if I'm not able to take down a grass type quick enough. But luckily in this battle I am. Shroomish goes down without ever attacking us with a grass type move, and then all that's left is the Horsey, which doesn't really have anything to deal significant damage to us, so we beat the old man and we move on to the Power Rangers, where today I decide to fight Red because I have super effective damage against both, and Relicanth has a very high defense stat, so if Houndour hits it, it's not really going to do that much. Anyway, let's go ahead and start just a little bit of rambling. If you are enjoying this video so far, consider liking, and if you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. Anyway, with all that out of the way, of course this battle really doesn't last all that long. Water Gun takes down Houndour, and then all that's left is the Slugma, which of course can't really do too much to me. And if it does take down Wailmer, I know for a fact Relicanth can take it down with relative ease. But that doesn't end up happening. We beat Red, and we get access into the Cypher base, where I learned Rock Tomb, which is very nice, but unfortunately it's 80% accurate, so that can make it kind of annoying. And then I run into another Wailmer. Hello, other Wailmer. Goodbye, other Wailmer. And then I move on to the battle against Lavernish, who leads with a Love Disc and a Beautifly, and with Rock type damage I should be able to take down the Love Disc in a single hit. And Rollout actually doesn't. That's a bit surprising. Beautifly goes down, and then out comes Roselia. I go for Rock Tomb into it and another Rollout, which takes it down to half. Rock Tomb hits it, finishing it off, and then out comes her final Pokemon, a Shadow Delcatty, and as long as Rollout doesn't miss, I should be able to take it down on this turn with relative ease. So it hits the Shadow Rush, not doing that much to Relicanth. Rollout hits, taking it down to half, and Water Gun gets a crit, takes it down to low yellow. Okay, I really expected the damage of Rollout to be higher, but that's alright. One last Rollout finishes it off, and then all that's left is the Love Disc, which should go down to the final Rollout, which it does, and we move on. Now, of course, you can't have a Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness video without the obligatory Mirror B, of course. So how are you doing on this joyous day, Mirror B? Well, it's always good to see you. Anyway, at level 23, Wailmer gets the move Astonish, which I probably won't use, but I'll teach it over Splash. And then at level 22, Relicanth gets Yawn, which I teach over Harden. And then I go to the Relicanth Tower, where I go pick up my 2 favorite TMs, Hidden Power and Protect, and I'm going to teach it to both. And Wailord has Hidden Power Psychic at 35 base power, which really isn't all that great, but it at least hits the Grass Poison types, so that's alright. And Relicanth has hidden power ground, which is very nice at 53 base power. So even though I don't think Wailmer's is as good, it certainly does have its uses. Anyway, with that, we go ahead and move on. At level 28, Wailmer gets the move Water Pulse, which I teach over Water Gun, and I pick up the Swinub for the Never Melt Ice item to raise ice type damage by 10%. Then soon after, I teach Ice Beam to Wailmer, and then I run into yet another Wailmer. Hello there, Wailmer. Goodbye, other Wailmer. And then, I wasn't really planning on picking up the Seal, but its HP was low enough, I went ahead and went for it. Anyway, with that, we move on to the battle against Natalie. This was a Quagsire and a Lantern, and I go for Ice Beam and Hidden Power Grounded to Lantern, hoping to take it down in a single turn, though unfortunately it does survive with just a little bit of HP left, and it hits Relicanth for a lot of damage with a Shockwave. Go for Ice Beam into Quagsire, get a Lucky Freeze, and Hidden Power finishes off Lantern. So then he sends out his Shadow Lunatone, which is always a bit of a threat, and might actually outspeed my two Pokemon. Quagsire gets unfrozen the following turn, which is very unfortunate. Go for Water Pulse and Water Gun into it, which Water Gun's doing about a 6th, and Water Pulse takes it down to low yellow. So unfortunately it is able to set up Shadow Sky, and it's going to be able to attack the following turn. And I don't think either of my Pokemon can survive it. Wailmer goes down, and Relicanth actually survives on 2 HP. Now of course I still have the Seal in the back because I just caught it, but once Relicanth goes down, we go ahead and move on to the 4th attempt against this battle. And as you can see, we're a few levels higher, and I'm going for Astonish on Lantern, hoping to get a Lucky Flinch. Unfortunately, I don't get it on this attempt, and Wailmer gets hit by a Shockwave, and Relicanth gets hit by a Rock Tomb. I go for a Yawn into Quagsire to put it to sleep, and go for Astonish to finish off the Lantern, then out comes the Shadow Lunatone once again. And now that Quagsire shouldn't be a threat anymore, I can go ahead and focus all my attention on the Lunatone. I go for Water Pulse and Water Gun, now with a few levels higher. Water Pulse nearly takes it down in a single hit, and Water Gun is able to finish it off, though the Fruity Pebbles are coming down. Then out comes the Cast Form, which is going to be a bit of a threat because it also has Shockwave, though at least it's not getting stab on it, so it's not going to deal as much damage as Lantern was doing. So I go for Rock Tomb into it, which unfortunately misses, and Water Pulse takes it down to yellow, and also gets a Confusion. So there is a chance it might hit itself on this following turn, which it doesn't. Shockwave hits Relicanth, not really doing that much damage. Go for Rock Tomb to finish it off, and then he sends out his final Pokemon, which is Matang. And Water Pulse hits it for neutral damage, dealing almost half its health. Quagsire wakes up but misses a Rock Tomb, which I think was actually vital, because if I got hit by it, I'm pretty sure Relicanth wouldn't have outsped and taken down Matang in a single hit. So all that's left is the Quagsire, which Water Pulse takes it down to yellow, and Relicanth just needs to hit one more attack to finish it off. So with Snaddle defeated, we now move on to another Relicanth. Hello there, other Relicanth. Goodbye, other Relicanth. Anyway, I decide to go stop by the tutor lady to go pick up the move for Body Slam, and I teach that over Yawn, and then soon after, Wailmer gets the move Rest at level 37, which I teach over Astonish, and then I go into the battle against Gonzap. He leads with a Nuzleaf and Electrode, and unfortunately the Nuzleaf is going to use Fake Out on the first turn, and because we're both water types, Electrode's going to go for Spark, which does a lot of damage, and Electrode survives a Hidden Power Ground, so I have to go for another to finish it off, and it does quite a bit of damage to me in return. Feint attacks are really starting to add up. Go for Body Slam into Nuzleaf, and don't get the KO on it either. And unfortunately, Vileplume finishes me off with Giga Drain. But I do have a pretty easy solution, and that's because in just a couple levels, Wailmer evolves into Wailord, which is really going to help its survivability and damage output. So Wailord has 170 HP, 90 attack, 45 defense, 90 special attack, 45 special defense, and 60 speed. So it is still fairly slow and has really bad defenses, but a 170 HP stat makes it incredibly tanky. And it has a solid 90 base attack and special attack, so it should be able to hit much harder. Anyway, with that, we move on to the battle against Gonzap once again, and unfortunately I didn't decide to teach Protect, so I am going to get hit on the first turn, and Wailord unfortunately doesn't take down Electrode in a single hit, so Electrode will outspeed this following turn, hit another Spark, taking Relicanth down to yellow. Ice Beam finishes it off, and then he sends out Vileplume. And I go for Hidden Power Grounded it, though I do think Body Slam would have done more damage, but I don't think it's going to matter because Ice Beam should be able to take it down from here, which it does, and then out comes Whiscash. And I go for Body Slam into the Nuzleaf that, now that I am a level higher, does actually take it down, though I do think it is a bit of a range. Then I go for Ice Beam into the Whiscash, taking it down to half, and Body Slam to finish it off, leaving just the Skarmory left, who hits a Hyper Beam, not dealing that much damage. And all I need to do is hit a Water Pulse and Rock Tomb, and that should be able to take it down, I think. It gets confused. Rock Tomb actually leaves it on a sliver, but it's stuck recharging, so I finish it off the following turn, and beat Gonzap on the second attempt. At level 44, Wailord gets the move Water Spout, which is a 150 base power water type move that is unfortunately tied to how much HP you have left. Though it is a very good move, however, it can be a little inconsistent. At the top of the pyramid, I teach Wailord Protect over Rollout, and I teach Relicanth Earthquake. Now moving on to the battle against Gorgon, he leads with Cecilio and Alaron, and I go for Ice Beam and Rock Tomb into Cecilio, though I think in hindsight I really should have just gone for Protect and Earthquake, because Wailord can't really do anything here, and in fact Relicanth misses its Rock Tomb, which is just very unfortunate. Anyway, on the following turn I go for Water Spout, which KOs Laron in a single hit. It does a little bit of damage to Cecilio. Then out comes Slowking, go for Rock Tomb into Cecilio to finish it off, sending out his Ursaring. And because these two are out together, Ursaring's going to go for Protect. So now I decide to do the right thing and just go for Earthquake, which takes Slowking down to half. Slowking uses its own Earthquake, not really doing that much damage in return. Go for Water Spout and Body Slam, which Water Spout doesn't quite take down the Slowking and does half to Ursaring. I finish off the Slowking with Body Slam, and then out comes his first Shadow Pokemon, a Shadow Primeape. And Primeape might actually be the most dangerous thing on this team because it will outspeed me and hit Shadow Rush, which it doesn't actually do that much to Wailord, though it does weaken the power of Water Spout, though not enough that Ursaring doesn't get taken out by it, and then out comes his final Pokemon, a Shadow Hypno. Go for Body Slam to finish off the Primeape, and then all that's left is the Shadow Hypno, which I go for Ice Beam, which doesn't really do all that much. Body Slam takes it down below half, and paralyzes, and it decides to waste its turn using Shadow Down, so it's not able to attack, and I finish it off with one last Ice Beam, beating Gorgon on the first attempt. Before we go on to the last area of the game, at level 43, Relicanth gets Ancient Power, which I teach over Rock Tomb, and then we move on to the last area of the game, and these two are doing exceptionally well, though the last area of the game is always very difficult, so let's go ahead and see how they fare. With our first battle being against Lavrina, she leads with a Gardevoir and a Gorbis, and I go for Protect and Earthquake, and Earthquake is able to take Gardevoir down to red, and a critical hit takes down Gorbis in a single hit, so that was very lucky. Out comes the Roselia, and I go for Water Spout, taking down the Gardevoir, and dealing a little bit of damage to Roselia. Then out comes Farfetch'd, her first Shadow Pokemon, Body Slam into Roselia to finish it off, and then out comes her final Pokemon, a Shadow Altaria. Altaria is 4 times weak to Ice, so it's not a threat at all, but if Farfetch'd outspeeds my Relicanth, it could cause problems. Though, luckily it doesn't, and Ancient Power finishes it off with another crit. There was a lot of crits that game. Anyway, moving on, I run into another Wailord. Hello, other Wailord. Goodbye, other Wailord. And then we get to the top of the volcano, where I run into Snaddle once again. He leads with a Metang and Quagsire, and I decide to go for Ice Beam to start tailing damage to the Quagsire. It's not quite enough to take it down in a single hit, and I go for Hidden Power Ground because I don't want to damage Wailord with Earthquake. And unfortunately, because of that, I'm not able to take it down in a single hit. So I decide on the following turn to go for Protect and Earthquake to finish them both off, which then he sends out his Scizor and Shadow Soul Rock. And if I'm not able to take down the Soul Rock in a single turn, it will set up Shadow Sky, so I want to get rid of it as soon as possible. I go for Water Spout, which luckily does take it down, and does quite a bit to Scizor as well. It hits a Silver Wind, getting a crit, taking me down to 86 HP, which is very unfortunate. He then sends out his Shadow Starmie in Cast Form. And unfortunately, both of my Pokemon are getting kinda low here. I go for Protect and Earthquake, which luckily works out, because Relicanth is able to survive, get past the paralysis, and get the Earthquake off, though it's not quite enough to take either of them down. And then I go for Water Spout, which is a little bit risky, because with the Shadow Storm hitting, I might not be able to take down the Cast Form, though luckily I do. And then all that's left is the Starmie. I go for Protect, hoping that it's not able to one-shot me. And unfortunately, Shadow Storm hits and takes me down from 94 HP. But with how close that battle was, I decided to just reset and go for it again. Unfortunately not getting any experience from the battle, but I think going back into it again with a different turn 1 should be good enough. I take down the Quagsire right away, that way my speed isn't lowered. The Scizor comes out, and Thunder Punch really doesn't do that much for Metang. But the thing is it does have a 10% chance to paralyze, so I do want to get rid of it as soon as possible. So I go for Earthquake, and that actually does half to Scizor, which is very nice to know. It misses a Steel Wing, which is only a 5% chance. And then I go for Water Spout, taking down the Soul Rock in a single hit, and finishing off Scizor, bringing out his final 2 Pokemon once again, the Cast Form and Shadow Starmie. And this time I have a lot more HP, so I should be able to take them down but Shadow Stormy does hit very hard. I go for Body Slam, taking Cast Form down below yellow, and then I go for Earthquake, which finishes off Cast Form and does quite a bit of damage to Stormy. At level 50, Relicanth gets Rest, which I decide not to learn, and then I go for Protect and Earthquake once again because, well, I think I'm just being goofy with it. I know Earthquake should take it down anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Anyway, now moving on to Ardos, he leads with a Shadow Swallow and Alakazam, and unfortunately both of his Pokemon definitely outspeed me. So Swallow goes for Shadow Half on the first turn, which is definitely not a great start. Thunder Punch takes Relicanth down to 7, Ice Beam takes down the bird, and Ancient Power is able to take down the Alakazam. He sends out his Kingdra, and then he sends out his Heracross. I decide not to learn Amnesia after quite a bit of thought, and then I continue on. The Heracross comes out, and I want to keep Wailord as healthy as possible, so I decide to go for Protect this turn and go for Ancient Power into the Heracross, though it decides to take down Relicanth, and then all that's left is the Wailord, which goes for Water Spout. Not quite enough to take down Heracross, it gets taken down to 37 HP, and Heracross hits a Rock Tomb, taking it down to 5. I'm actually a bit surprised it didn't just go down right away, but Brick Break finishes it off. So I decide to go ahead and teach Protect to Relicanth. That way, on the first turn, I know that I'm not going to get hit by Shadow Half. Now the funny thing about Swallow is that because Wailord's HP is so high, I think it always goes for Shadow Half, which is very nice because it means that I can attack every other turn and not have to worry about taking damage in return, other than, of course, the other Pokemon next to him. And the great thing about Wailord is that it has the move Rest, so as long as I keep my HP up, I can constantly make the Swallow have to use Shadow Half. So every other turn, I will use Rest, and then Call, and then Rest again. Now, the only way this plan fails is if either Wailord goes down, probably due to a critical hit, or if Relicanth goes down, of course being my only damage dealer in this battle. So I take down Kingdra with Ancient Power, then out comes the Heracross once again. I know for a fact Heracross is a 2-shot with Ancient Power, though once its health is halved, I can go for Ancient Power and finish it off. And then he sends out his second Shadow Pokemon, a Shadow Electabuzz. Now, Electabuzz is a bit of a wild card. It could go for Shadow Break, it could go for Shadow Storm, or it too could go for Shadow Half. And that's actually what it decides to do, which is very nice because now I can take down Electabuzz and Swallow and only have the Shadow Snorlax out. So I won't be hit by moves like Shadow Mist, lowering my evasiveness. And so Snorlax's only move is Shadow End, which is only 60% accurate. It does a lot of damage when it hits, but it's less likely to do so. So it's a very nice position to be in. I go for Protect with Wailord in case it decides to target it, and I go for Earthquake, which does about a third. I go for Ice Beam and Ancient Power, which Ice Beam takes it down to half, Ancient Power takes it down to low red, Shadow End hits, getting a crit on Relicanth, but because of its very high defense it actually doesn't go down, and one last Ice Beam takes it down. So with that, we beat Ardos on the second attempt. Now moving on to Gorgon, he leads with a Slowking and Ursaring this time, and the Ursaring is going to go for Protect on the first turn, so I go ahead and go for Ancient Power, taking Slowking down to half, and Earthquake really doesn't do that much damage. I go for Ice Beam into Ursaring and Ancient Power to finish off the Slowking, and Ice Beam didn't do as much damage as I thought it would. I was really hoping it'd take it down to half. Out comes Aggron, and despite getting hit by Slash, I actually decided to go for Water Spout this turn and Body Slam into the Ursaring. Though, unfortunately, I made the wrong call, though Aggron does go down to a crit Water Spout, but Ursaring decided to protect this turn. Then out comes Walrein, go for Ancient Power into it, and another Water Spout, which doesn't quite finish off Ursaring because of my lower health, but Walrein does fall to an Ancient Power. Then out comes his first Shadow Pokemon, a Shadow Poliwrath, another Slash from Ursaring, taking Wailord down to 163. I decide to go for Ice Beam to finish off the Ursaring, and then I go for Ancient Power to hit his next Shadow Pokemon, Shadow Mr. Mime, because it has a fairly low defense stat, taking it down to low yellow, and I get the 10% Omni Boost, raising all my stats by one stage, which is very nice. I decide to go for Protect and Earthquake this turn, and Earthquake of course finishes off the Mr. Mime, but also takes down the Poliwrath with a crit. So with that, we now move on to Eldis, who leads with a Ninjask and a Manectric, and because I want to get rid of the Manectric as soon as possible, I decide to go for Earthquake and take it down, and then he sends out his next Shadow Pokemon, which is a Shadow Salamence, and I'm not actually sure how much Salamence is going to do to Wailord, though I expect it to do quite a lot, so hopefully it doesn't decide to attack me, that way I have Water Spout for later. Ninjask hits, doing about 50 damage, and Salamence decides to just go for Shadow Hold. So Ice Beam is able to take it down in a single hit, and then he sends out his next Dragon type, that being Flygon. Go for Ancient Power to take down Ninjask at this point, and then he sends out his Shadow Marowak. And now, in hindsight, I do think that this was a bit risky, but I really think that Water Spout should be able to take down Marowak in a single hit. So I decide to go for it. Relicanth luckily doesn't get paralyzed by Dragon Breath, and unfortunately Marowak actually survives with a bit of HP left. It luckily misses Shadow End, so I'm able to get by, but really I was risking it for nothing, so in hindsight maybe I should have just not gone for it in the first place, but I take them both down, and then he sends out his final Pokemon, a Shadow Lapras. Now unfortunately the Shadow Sky is set up, so it is going to attack on the first turn, but I do think I should be able to take it down right away with Ancient Power, and with a crit that is more than guaranteed. So with that, we move on to the big box legendary, Shalvalugia, and while I do have super effective damage to hit it both on the physical and special side, I do think that this battle might take a moment, and unfortunately it decides to go for Shadow down right away, lowering Relicanth's defense, and then I decide to protect with Relicanth because of that, but it decides to attack Wailord, dealing nearly half my health. And so I decide to protect Wailord this turn, and it decides to attack Relicanth. It called me out on every single turn, but with Shalvalugia defeated, we move on to the final boss, Gravel, and he leads with a Rhydon and a Moltres. I go for Ancient Power into the Moltres just to see how much damage it's going to do, and of course it takes it down in a single hit. It's 4 times effective, and Relicanth is a Rock type. Then out comes Shadow Executor. Rhydon hits a Shadow End, taking Relicanth down to 7 HP, and then I decide to go for Ice Beam into Executor, and realize that I ran out of Ancient Power PP. So while I might be able to get past his next couple Pokemon, I don't think I'm going to get past the legendary birds. So Tauros comes out, lowering my attack. Relicanth holds on because of the Focus Band item, giving it a 10% chance to survive. Tauros sets up Shadow Sky, so Relicanth will go down this turn, but not before getting a little bit of experience from Rhydon. Then out comes Articuno. Pretty Pebbles come down, taking down Relicanth and doing a little bit of damage to Wailord. And I just decide to go for another Water Spout, though Articuno outspeeds, takes me down to 20, and Water Spout does almost nothing, even with a critical hit. So unfortunately, Wailord does go down for the first attempt, but I do have a solution. Really, the only problem these two have is the fact that they're not especially fast. However, once Relicanth is in the rain, it will double its speed, meaning I will outspeed absolutely everything. So after teaching it to Wailord, I go back into the battle once again, set up Rain Dance, and Shadow Fire crits and takes down Relicanth in a single hit. Okay, well that was a terrible second attempt, but of course this does eventually end up working. On the 4th attempt now, I set up the rain right away. Relicanth still gets hit, taken down to half HP, but Moltres goes down. Then out comes Executor, and unfortunately Rhydon decides to hit Shadow End, taking Wailord far down into yellow. So right off the bat, I'm sitting in a pretty bad spot, but this is still definitely doable, so I decide to go for Protect and Earthquake. That way I can finish off the Rhydon and start dealing damage to the Executor, while at the same time protecting my Wailord from damage, and then out comes the Shadow Tauros. I decided to equip the White Herb item on Relicanth at this point because I really don't want its attack to be lowered, and I decided to go for Ancient Power into Tauros because it's going to set up Shadow Sky, and I need Wailord to set up the rain once again. I am risking Executor hitting, but it is only a 60% chance, so I don't think I'm being all that risky. But on the very next turn, it hits me with the Shadow End, taking Wailord down to 15 HP, and because Tauros sees the KO, it's actually just going to go for the attack. So I decide to go for Earthquake, finishing off Tauros, and dealing a little bit more damage to Executor, though it does still survive with just a sliver. Then out comes Articuno once again, but because I'm faster than it, I go for Ancient Power, taking it down in a single hit. And then out comes his final Pokemon, a Shadow Zapdos, which Ice Beam takes all the way down to low yellow, and I get a lucky freeze. Executor hits another Shadow End, taking Relicanth down to yellow as well, and unfortunately Zapdos can't really do anything here. It goes down to an Ancient Power, and then all that's left is Executor. I decide not to learn Double Edge, and Ice Beam takes down Executor, beating Gravel on the 4th attempt, which I think was pretty good all things considered. I mean, the second attempt was definitely a complete dud, and the 3rd attempt I forgot to equip the White Herb item, but I think overall they did very well. So let's go ahead and go over just how well they did. They beat the game at a time of 9 hours, 27 minutes, and 22 seconds, with Wailord being level 57 and Relicanth being level 56. Throughout the game, they fainted 13 times in total, 3 of those to random trainers and 10 of those to bosses, which is a bit surprising because I really expected the random trainers with grass types to give them more of a problem, but I think that once Wailord got Ice Beam, it really wasn't all that much of an issue for them. So now moving on over to the tier list, where they actually find themselves at the top of the A tier. So they did exceptionally well, and I think that there are really only 2 issues with them. The first being that both of them are kinda slow, so there are a lot of Pokemon that outspeed them, or I need to level up a bit more, but it's not really that big of an issue. And Relicanth has the move Rock Tomb for a large portion of the game, which is 80% accurate, so there are times where I'd want it to hit and unfortunately it doesn't, but honestly a 20% miss chance isn't even all that bad. Something else to note is that I have officially affixed the tier list a bit. It was getting a bit unruly with Pokemon not quite in their lines or just being squished and squashed a little too much, but I went ahead and got things closer together, fixed the lines a bit better, and I think honestly it just looks a lot better all around. So with that, I think it's finally time to awaken the Regis for Regicember. Regi Christmas? I don't know, I actually never picked a name for it. But for the next 3 days, I'm going to be uploading all the Regis in their own solo runs, and seeing which one performs the best. And honestly, I'm not really sure who to start with, so let's go ahead and give it a spin on the wheel to see who goes first. Now, I don't really have a preference on the Regis. I have ones that I like more, but I think that all 3 of them have their own strengths and weaknesses, but I think every single one of them is going to do very well. So with that, we go ahead and roll Regirock as our first Regi. So with that, make sure you stick around for Regicember coming these next 3 days, as long as I don't somehow miss the upload date. But anyway, if you did enjoy this video, consider liking and subscribing. If you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. Thank you so much for watching, and bye!